Well, good evening and welcome back to HBF. This week, I hope that your week is off to a great start and that you guys are all doing well. This week, we're going to be looking at John chapter 5. So we're jumping back a couple weeks and looking at what Matthew preached on when Jesus heals a man on the Sabbath. So as you guys are settling in and getting ready, go ahead and reread this passage. We're looking at John 5 verses 1 through 17. And then as you guys finish up reading that, just kind of go over your first impressions of that passage, and then we'll jump into it. So Matthew does a really good job at giving us a lot of background information, a lot of backstory to this guy and to necessarily the pool at Bethesda and what it meant to be at this pool. And he gave us this idea of what it would have been like to be with all the invalids that were around, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. And then, just like in the story, we see this guy who's been there for 38 years now. And like Jesus often does, he asks this question to drive a point home. Not necessarily to be obvious about it, but he's getting at something deeper there. So he asks the question in verse 6. He says, "Do you want to be healed?" Now for us, this is an interesting question, one again, that might come off as really obvious, but I love the quote from C.S. Lewis that Matthew shares. It says, "A familiar captivity is frequently more desirable than an unfamiliar freedom." So my first question for you guys, in what ways do we remain comfortable in our captivity? Why would we want to remain comfortable in captivity? Matthew says at one point in the sermon, he says, we like the idea of being made well by Jesus, but maybe not the idea of what it demands of us. So my second question for tonight is when we look at being made well and as Christians, as people who have been spiritually made well in Christ, what is it exactly that Jesus demands from us from here on out? And how do we feel about that? You guys go ahead and chat about it. So as we close out for the evening, one of the things that I want us to look at, and an overarching theme that we see here is in verse 17. It says, "But Jesus answered them, 'My Father is working until now, and I am working.'" One of Matthew's points is that Jesus is, in fact, he is the Lord of the Sabbath. So take some time and talk about how this passage points to Jesus being the Lord of the Sabbath and what that means for us. My second question in this is also, it is a command for us to have a Sabbath, for us to rest, and for us to find joy and relaxation in the Father. As we are moving through life and going through our busy schedules, how exactly in an act of worship are we taking a Sabbath for ourselves?